Let's hear from actor and UNDP Goodwill Ambassador Connie Britton to explore the impact of the pandemic on women and mothers around the world.
I'm here with Connie Britton, who is four-time Emmy and Golden Globe nominated actor and a UNDP Goodwill Ambassador. Welcome to the SDG Action Zone. Thank you for being part of this conversation about women and how they're really bearing the brunt of this pandemic. And it's such an important conversation. We know that COVID is exacerbating inequalities in so many ways here in the US, where we are, all around the world, and having such a devastating impact on people. But, I'm finding it hard enough coping with working from home with a nearly 3-year-old. It's been pretty crazy. We've been potty training. So in fact, if we get through this without him running in, talking about poop, we'll be lucky. So it's happened. Oh. So I wanted to ask you, what it's been like for you, as a working mother. What's changed for you? How's it been during lockdown and virtual remote schooling?
I mean, everything has changed, of course. And the remote schooling has been so challenging. It's still just it changes your brain so much to think about how you suddenly start having a productive learning experience for your child from home and through the internet and without any sense of community or any actual teacher, in person. So it's, I think for everybody, it's been a really substantial change and challenge. But at least I have the internet, and I have the access to the technology that we need and all of that. So I just, I realize, as difficult as it is for me and for us and for my son, and he has his own issues, and right now, and you talk about it's a son, right?
Right.
Son coming in to talk about poop. My son is trying so desperately to avoid doing his schoolwork that he might come pay us a visit as well. But, it's really a difficult thing, particularly as a single mom, particularly as moms, people who are the primary breadwinners in their family and not being able to work, and also having to take care of your child's education. There are just new issues for all of us, and particularly women, that are unprecedented.
And how has your typical day changed? Has it changed a lot? Have things been really different for you in the last 6-7 months?
Oh, yeah. I mean, substantially, because we've been at home and we've been not going out. And now, even as I anticipate going back into production, I have to think about how I'm going to juggle my son's education, quarantine, any kind of travel, logistics, and how I'm going to make sure that he's taken care of and learning while I'm, working. That's a huge challenge for me that I've never had to confront before. And I have resources to address it. It's not going to be convenient. It's not going to be easy. I still get resentful, like, nobody's considering the single mom here, how we're going to manage this. But at the same time, I can figure it out. And there are so many women in particular around the world who have no other options. And particularly in this time and during this pandemic, so many healthcare workers, I think the statistic is something like globally 70% of our healthcare workers are women. So women have already been putting themselves in harm's way. And in addition to that, the preponderance of domestic responsibilities globally fall upon women. We're trying so hard with the global goals to get to gender equity by 2030. And this is taking a substantial toll, particularly on women and particularly on women economically.
UNDP's own research and assessment has shown that an extra 47 million women are going to be thrown into extreme poverty due to COVID, which is a really terrible fact, especially as it's going to reverse all that good progress that we've made in the past few years on reducing poverty. And I think that's an actual reversal of all the gains that have been made in the last few years, all the good work that's been done, which is just so awful to think about. Yeah. This kind of idea that, you know, women who are so much more, who make up so many more in the informal sector, so they don't have any social protection, they don't have any of the kind of welfare that, you know, people in the more formal economy have. They also can't work virtually like we can.
What I've always said about poverty and the economy is that when women are given equal standing economically, we all prosper, communities prosper. And that has been proven time and time again.
You know, it's not as if before COVID everything was great. You know, it was, even though we'd made good progress on poverty and taking women out of poverty, though things were still tough. And I want to talk about some research that UNDP put out in February, just before COVID hit, which is pretty startling. It's about people's beliefs and their prejudices around gender. And so we found that worldwide, almost 30% of people think it's justifiable for a man to beat his partner. Mm-hmm. Women represent only 12% of top billionaires and only less than 6% of CEOs. And in 2019, women only held 24% of parliamentarian seats and only 5% of heads of government were women. Mm-hmm. And those are pretty shocking. I think, you know, we were pretty shocked by some of those statistics. And I wanted to ask you what you think about those, and also whether you personally have encountered discrimination for your women because you're a woman, particularly in your field.
To actually see those statistics in black and white is just so devastating. You know, I mean, we can be aware of circumstances relating to some of those statistics that you talk about. We can look at our own government and see such a huge lack of women representation, and yet to really just see it spelled out in black and white, as the UNDP survey shows us, it's pretty devastating. And one other statistic, and I believe it's that 50% of men think that in times of crisis, men have more right to job opportunity than women do. So, you know, we really are facing difficult cultural norms. It's a steep uphill climb because these ideas are so deeply entrenched in our ways of thinking and in our culture that we don't even realize that they're there. And so that's why, you know, being able to look at these kind of statistics and say, wow, that's what's happening, I think is valuable and important. And, you know, certainly you asked the question about, have I faced any issues like that in my career? And sure, I mean, across, you know, whether it's coming up at a time when most roles and most stories were written about men and for men, you know, and I think we are starting to see some change there, but it's been very slow process. Most directors are men, most writers are men, have been men historically and traditionally. You know, one of the biggest issues, of course, is inequity in terms of pay. And that is still extremely prevalent and problematic in my business and in every business, in terms of women getting paid the same as their male counterparts.
It's almost like those kind of entrenched prejudices, norms that people have are going to be some of the hardest things to change, you know, and especially as we build back from COVID, like how do we do things differently? I mean, if people have such entrenched feelings about gender and other things, you know, how are we going to do it? And actually, UNDP came out with a report a couple of months ago about something called a temporary basic income, which basically is like a payment to people, a basic payment for people, you know, who can't work, you know, particularly women who are in the informal sector. And also, actually, at the time, you know, cases were surging in COVID. I mean, they still are actually around the world. And so this would also be a good way of keeping people at home. And it was really interesting because I think such a kind of measure is actually being taken up by a lot of countries around the world, and it wouldn't have happened, just kind of 6-7 months ago. These ideas would have been thought of as like crazy, and it really does seem like there are unprecedented measures for these unprecedented times. And maybe we'll be able to build back better. Maybe we'll be able to change things for the better, as we come out, and it's going to be such a struggle to come out of this crisis. But I wonder if you have, your thoughts about, in a post-COVID world, like what would be an ideal scenario? Like what would be the vision for you for how we could live in a post-COVID world?
Well, I think you make such a good point. I think in this time of crisis, we've actually had to think more expansively in terms of how to address some of these issues. And my hope is that we will continue thinking in that way. We will see some of the positive results of these temporary income activations around the world, and continue to utilize those, because we'll also see how when women are empowered economically, we all prosper, we all benefit. So I would just, as you say, I'd like to keep that trend going, and also in terms of legislation and social policy, where we are taking care of our children, making sure that education is provided, family paid leave, all of the things that can help parents work and children get the care and the education that they need. I would love to see a continuation of that, and really a nation that takes that seriously, and a world that takes that seriously. As long as there's COVID anywhere, no one is safe. So we need to really have a very global outlook in terms of how we are addressing this crisis and this issue, and be very specific and very targeted about that. That would make a big difference.
Yeah.
I believe.
What in this kind of like dream world, could we do? How do we make things better?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a big question, and one I have felt somewhat paralyzed by for a really long time. And then I kind of realized that I just have to wake up in the morning every day and try to think about it and do something toward that greater end. And I will say that in this moment in time where we've had to be in quarantine and haven't been able to have life as usual and business as usual, I've really tried to think about how to use this time to look outward, and how can we build strength for women around the world. How can we get word out into the culture that will help empower women and change thinking about how we see women and men and economic parity. So I think I've just, I'm sort of suggesting to everybody, friends of mine, people that I don't know, but who are also kind of daunted by this idea, use this time and let's be creative, and let's think about how we can make a post-COVID world a more equitable world, and hopefully also have that transcend governments as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Connie. Great advice. Thank you so much for drawing attention to this crucial issue of gender and how women are bearing the brunt really of this COVID pandemic. You're an inspiration to us. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us in the SDG Action Zone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so wonderful to be here. Keep up the great work.
And it's a miracle that we have not been interrupted by any children.
I know.
I could. Mine was shouting a little bit, but hopefully no.
I heard that, but I wasn't sure.
Well, it was either him or my husband. I'm not sure. So. Thanks, Connie.
Thank you so much. Take care. It's great to talk to you.